Thank you so much for attending my PowerPoint presentation on the unwritten rules of Dota. Dota 2 is an incredibly complicated game, so much so that there isn't even a single location where you can look up all the rules. But even once you're done figuring out the Rube Goldberg machine that is the actual competitive video game, there's also the social aspects. Dota 2 is a game best enjoyed with friends, and if you don't have them, Valve will assign you 4 strangers to pretend to be lifelong friends with at the beginning of every match, for around 45 minutes at a time. And when it comes to getting along with them, there's a lot of things that newer players need to know, so I thought it might be beneficial for me to list out a couple of the unwritten rules of Dota. The very first amendment of our social contract is to never deny tier 3s. Denying one of your own towers, especially one that the enemy team has been fighting tooth and nail for the better part of several minutes, is one of the most satisfying things to do in this game. Tier 1s and 2s are both fair dinkum, but when it comes to tier 3s, it is absolutely crucial to never deny it, even if it only has a single HP left. There are a couple different reasons not to do this, but the most obvious one is that it makes your ranged barracks susceptible to chip damage. If the enemy has any kind of disposable summon units, or even just a mantis tile, they can begin chipping away at it, like a new form of trench warfare. Also, a tower at 1 HP can still clear out an entire creep wave with the use of Fortify, but by denying your tower, you're removing your ability to take advantage of that. The only real exception to this is if the enemy team is actively attacking the tier 3, you know it's going to go down, and you, as a Crystal Maiden, rip a lone dinger in an attempt to get the deny. If I had my way, denying a tier 3 as a Crystal Maiden would instantly win you the game, but for now, it's just a massive morale killer for the enemy team. Still, always remember in the game of Dota 2 that if you can't do something useful, you may as well do something funny. Next up is honestly the very first thing that any Dota player should learn, which is to always carry a TP scroll. There is nothing more depressing in this game we play than when the enemies are finally at the gates, you're doing your best to hold them off, you pan over to your position 1's inventory while they're split pushing and notice a distinct lack of paper. And while the late game consequences of not having a TP scroll are fairly obvious, this should also apply in the early and mid game as well. If you're a support player and you want to make friends with your position 2, the best thing you can do is TP in as they're getting dove and help them turn the kill. And if you don't have a TP, then you won't be able to do that, and your dead mid laner will be more than happy to help you realize your mistake. Now, if always having a TP scroll is rule 1 of Dota, I'd argue that having 2 of them on you at any given time should be rule 1.1. Because if you do wind up using your one and only TP, then suddenly you don't have a TP anymore, and thus you are breaking the rule. But always remember that even if you do have a TP, there's nothing preventing the Ogre Camp from winding up and giving you a big ol' smack in the middle of your 5.5 second TP back to the base. Next is for the draft, and this is some information that many position 1 players refuse to allow to seep into their tiny skulls. If you're in the middle of the draft and someone on your team is hovering over a cheesy pick like a Meepo or an Arc Warden, that means that it's time for you to pick your own hero. What this person is offering is a chance to turn the game into a binary experience, effectively a coin flip in order to gain or lose MMR, but they, as an individual, can tilt the odds into a 60-40 situation. Outside of Smurf situations, getting a 60% win rate is borderline impossible, and this person is willing to give it to you for free. But if they are forced to pick their hero in the second phase because you absolutely demand last pick as a position 4, your odds of winning drastically go down. When you force your local Meepo spammer into picking in the second phase, there is a much better chance that he winds up blind picking into a Winter Wyvern and a Troll Warlord, and even if he doesn't, they still have the last pick in order to counter him. Just choose a generic hero, give them last pick, and take solace in the fact that if they wind up feeding, you are socially allowed, maybe even obligated, to say mean things to them in voice chat. Valentine's Day has ended, and that means that my local Walgreens has all of the Ferrero Rochers on sale. My goal for the rest of February is to buy as many as I possibly can, eat them all by myself, and then use the wrappers as impromptu toys for my cat. If you'd like to help me on my real-life side quest, please check out the Patreon linked in the description, where you can get early videos, handwritten letters, and now replay reviews by yours truly. And if you're already a patron, thank you very much for your continued support. Now when it comes to deciding which hero on your team gets to pick up Aegis of the Immortal after killing Roshan, there's the Law of the Jungle and the Law of Man. The Law of the Jungle consists of determining which heroes on your team are able to most dexterously relocate their magic wands and bracers into the inventories of their teammates. That's what our ancestors did, but the more practical solution these days is to look at your team and figure out which hero is going to be walking up to hit the tier 3. The reason for this is because you, as the tower hitter, are going to have the most dangerous position when it comes time to take high ground. If you're a melee hero, you're going to be up those stairs doing your best to grind down the tower as quickly as you can while praying that the enemy team doesn't jump on you. And if you're ranged, you're going to be ever so slightly below the stairs, angry that all of your attacks keep missing. Either way, when it comes time for the enemy team to finally deal with your siege, you are going to be the primary point of contact. And if you, as the tower hitter, are able to set up a situation where they use all of their basic abilities and an ultimate or two on you, and then you pop right back up with a BKB ready to go, you will likely win the fight. Still, there are some exceptions to this, and if you have a powerful long-distance initiator who can jump the enemy backline like a kamikaze pilot, consider giving it to them instead. Best case scenario, while they're earning a double homicide case on the enemy support duo, you can waddle up and hit the tower and hope they don't notice. Now this is a fairly specific one, but it's something that I've talked about with multiple Dota 2 players, and a lot of them have come to the conclusion that if your mid laner ganks, they are allowed to steal your range creep. I know, this one sounds incredibly specific, but you would be surprised at how many Dota players consider it a god-given right. They bottled up a haste or maybe an invis rune, they've come down in order to secure you a kill, hell, they might even get a double kill themselves, but no matter what happens, they're allowed to take your ranged. Now this is an area of etiquette that is very easy to breach on both sides, and if the mid laner sticks around in order to sap some XP afterwards, some people might find that unsavory, while others find it within the acceptable bounds of Dota etiquette. But pretty much everyone can agree that if the mid laner decides to come over and flash farm your wave right in front of either the position 3 or the carry, then that's just being a dick. Another notable part about this unwritten rule is that the gank actually had to have worked. If they show up, waddle in the trees for a little while, only for the enemy to walk away because they were clearly under vision, they're not allowed to take shit. I don't give a damn how much money you still need to buy your Witchblade. If I ping my position 5 for stealing the last hit, you can be sure that I'm also going to ping you. Now this is another draft rule, and it has to do with one of the greatest game design decisions ever made, which is adding the 1 through 100 roll feature to the chat. Now if you aren't in the know, if you go to the chat box during the draft and type in /roll, it will immediately roll a D100 and spit out a number. There are many uses for this, including determining who on your team has the biggest penis, but the most practical of them all is determining who gets their desired roll in an unranked match. Let's say that after a 14-minute queue on a Thursday at 4 in the morning, you finally find your turbo match. You mark mid, but another guy does too. Since neither of you have a particularly strong claim to the position, you go to the chat and you spin the wheel. No matter what the individual numbers are or how far of a distance they have, the person who rolled higher is now the designated mid laner. The other guy can try to shoehorn himself as the new position 1, go over to the offlane, or play a support role, but he does not get to play mid. Now a lot of the rules on this list have at least a little bit of wiggle room, but this one does not, and if you want to see a grown man throw an absolute temper tantrum, go ahead and lose the role and decide to play mid anyway. And while I did describe it as a temper tantrum, that guy is absolutely in the right, because if you lose the role and decide to strong-arm yourself into that position anyway, you're ruining the game for everyone in the lobby. And remember that ignoring the role is just as bad as disrespecting it. Heed my words wisely, because if you don't, you'll be laying against not just an enemy Shadow Fiend, but also your own Treant Protector with a Blightstone and a Quelling Blade. Now the Vision game is a highly influential yet often overlooked component of a Dota match, and when it comes to support players learning it for the first time, the very first rule they should know is that the sentry goes before the observer. Let's say you realize that you have 4 observer wards in stash and you finally buy them all out and then panic to get them down, walking over to a ward spot. You put down the observer and everything looks fine, so you decide to put down a sentry, only to realize that the dastardly enemy support has preemptively put down a pair of his own wards there. By doing this, you've now revealed to the enemy team exactly where your ward is, and they are absolutely going to come collect. If you had put your sentry down first, you would have been able to safely deward or even put an observer down somewhere else in order to lead them astray. The other upside of putting a sentry down first is that you'll have a little bit more time to react to the enemy Ricky running at you with bloodlust in his eyes. And now with this advance warning, you can get ready to force staff yourself away from the cloud. You bought a force staff against Ricky, right? I wrote a little bit about attributing elements of Dota to either the Warcraft 3 devs or Valve. Feel free to read it if you like. Now this is a classic from back in the early days of Dota when wards cost money, but it still rings true in 2026. At the very beginning of the game, save one of the 2 observer wards for your position 2 player, regardless of what your early game strategies are. Now unlike a lot of the other rules on this list, this one doesn't purely stem from practicality. In fact, a good chunk of the reason you should do this is because of emotions. You see, a mid laner is a very sensitive beast, and if you wind up cucking him out of his vision right at the very start of the game, he's going to have low self-esteem. But if you save an observer reward for him during the strategy phase, he's now able to enter the match with maxed out mojo, in his lane, unbothered and moisturized. Now, there are many matchups where having advanced vision of the enemy is extremely important, either for setting up things like sideblade traps or accumulating magic wand charges. But honestly, you shouldn't even think about the matchup, because even if you do wind up picking up both wards as a support, you're going to be expected to put one down in the mid lane, and this can only end badly for you. If you put it down and it winds up getting dewarded before the bounty runes spawn, your mid laner is going to be pissed at you, because they probably had a much better spot to put it on. And if you do hog the observers for the side lanes and he winds up losing mid, you are going to be his sacrificial scapegoat from the strategy phase to the post-game chat. And finally, this is the most important unwritten rule of them all, and that is that all GG calls are fake. Now, saying GG after the most minor thing in the world is actually a common occurrence in all skill brackets, and I don't think a lot of people realize that this actually stems from tournament play. In Captain's Mode Dota, typing GG will automatically begin a countdown that results in you losing the game after 10 seconds that anyone on your team can cancel. It's a built-in feature for the game, but also, in professional tournaments, it is a legally binding thing to do. Even in casual draft leagues, a fake GG call is considered an incredibly impolite thing to do, and even they sometimes have rules against it. Of course, the extremeness of this means that people in pubs will spam it for absolutely zero reason, because there, it doesn't mean shit, and you, as the opposing team, should keep that in mind. If you team wipe the enemy in the late game, resulting in you getting Roshan and 2 lanes of barracks to see the enemy cores typing GG in chat, you should absolutely not use that as an invitation to stick around to hit the tier 4s. Because if you do, there is a very, very real chance that they are all going to start buying back and hopping out of the fountain, treating the game like TI Grand Finals Game 5. In the best case scenario, it's just 1 of 5 people conceding and saying that they will no longer contribute, but the rest of the people on their team are under no such obligation. And in the worst case, they are using it to actively bait you into overextending to hopefully flip the game. So if you are in the late game and wind up winning a big fight, only to see the enemy cores type GG in chat, the best thing to do is to just ignore it. Bide your time, look for picks, and play conservatively until the time is right to actually end the game, because any GG call when the Ancient isn't already at half HP doesn't mean shit. In conclusion, Dota is a Byzantine game, and you should absolutely play it. In our beloved game, there are no yellow flags, nor red. There are no fouls of any kind. The only penalties are the ones that we as a community elect to enforce. Peace on planet Earth.